Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Resident Evil Remake. It seems to be some kind of signpost. Each direction is accompanied by a corresponding destination. North, Valley of Destruction. South, Cave of Hatred. East, Summit of Madness. West, Path of Revenge. Keep those in mind for something coming up here.
One, respond.
Wesker?
Monster chains. Retreat. None exist. Away from the woods outside the mansion.
Notably, since that cutscene requires the radio, I believe that means it only plays if you manage to save Richard from the Yon's poison earlier. Either way, in the last part, we actually managed to finally escape the mansion now that we have all 4 death masks, and now we're in entirely new ground for the original Resident Evil. A statue with blue eyes. The inscription reads, "The Last Gasp of Destruction." And over here, a statue with red eyes. The inscription reads, "The War Cry of Revenge." The gate will open when the guard's desires are fulfilled. So, in order to actually do this puzzle here, we need to make the respective statues facing the directions from the signposts earlier in the topics they want to effectively witness. With that said, in order to actually rotate them, we need to use the switches here on these weather vanes. The red one represents the red-eyed statue, the blue one represents the blue-eyed statue. Make them face the right direction, and you're good. When I first played this game, I thought this puzzle was actually random. But no, it actually is timing-based. You want to stop the weather vanes directly when they're about to face the direction you want them to. And it definitely feels a little off, but it's not going to take too long to get it right if you get it wrong the first time. You just gotta go, alright, let's take another 5 seconds, get it right again, and you'll get it probably within like 20 seconds at most, I would guess. And doing that unlocks that door. Thus, we can access the next room. With that said, while I currently have it in my inventory, if you don't have the wind crest we got in the puzzle last part from the fishing lure puzzle, make sure you go and grab that either from the room itself if you haven't gotten it, or the item boxes, because we want to use that over here. There's something written in this indentation. When the wind sweeps across the earth, stars will shine in the heavens. And thus here we find the other 3 crests from the original Resident Evil. And thankfully we don't need to go too far to use them, we just need to go over to the next grave over. There is one other step to it though, also be careful of the crows, they do try to attack you. This is where they move them from the forest room. There's something carved into the indentation. 2 vertical lines, a cross, and 3 horizontal lines. Could it be some kind of symbol? What we need to do here is examine each of the 3 crests we just got and look at their back, at which point you can press a button to make these lines pop out, and then you can place them into this grave. You want to do this unless you're doing a minimalist run, as our reward from this is one of the best items in the game, albeit you really should store it away until you actually need to use it more accurately. Once you get all 3 crests ready to go, just put them into the grave and our reward will quickly become clear. Do also kind of wish they placed all 3 in at once, but I get why. Not that big a deal. Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my Magnum revolver. Strongest normal weapon in the game, but ammo is incredibly scarce. Save it for boss fights or even just the end game to begin with. Notably, Jill actually gets an exclusive one of these later on in her story, depending on your actions. That's the same sound I make when I wake up, whoever that was. I feel you there. With that said, I could actually recommend saving getting the Magnum for quite a bit later in the game, because we're going to loop back around to this place at a certain other point in time during the campaign. So if you either don't have the wind crest yet, or you don't have the inventory space yet, don't worry, there's a better opportunity potentially to grab that a little later on. This room in specific has always felt a little weird to me, because the camera angles make the path seem longer than it is, because if you follow just what seems to be the main camera angle, you go through an extra screen or 2, I think. But now we're in this cabin. There's notably a typewriter and an item box in here. And if you haven't saved in a while, I recommend saving now on a first run. And they even note that in the courtyard here. Yeah, if you follow the camera, you can like go around the side of the cabin first, and it always just feels a little weird. Notably, while there is a typewriter in here, though, I don't think there's any ink ribbons, but since there's an item box just the next screen away, you don't need to worry about that too much. A family picture. Clearly a kid and two parents, but it's a little torn up. There's a journal left by someone. 19. Daddy attached first. Mom attached second. Inside red and slimy, white and hard. Not true, Mom. Where? Dunno, Daddy. Found Mom again. When attached Mommy, she moved no more. She's screaming. Why? Just want to be with her. 4. Mom? Where? I miss you. Well, that's, little different from what we've seen thus far. A little disconcerting. Store the Magnum away. We'll be using that later, and might as well put the healing items away because I'm not going to need any for a little bit here. Shotgun and shotgun shells are all I really need. Our ultimate goal here in this cabin is actually just around this corner, because over here at this hallway end, there is a crank, the Resident Evil staple, and if we actually investigate it, this is specifically the square crank that we need. You need this to do anything in the opposite direction from the room that we left the mansion from. Alright, let's get out of here. As soon as I figure out where the door is for some reason. I don't think we're alone in here anymore. Oh dear. Oh, new boss creature for this game. I'm just gonna call her LT for now. She is immortal. Any amount of ammo you pump into her will just effectively bounce off, and you'll only piss her off more. And you need to be careful because she can kill you in like 3 shots because of her pure brute strength. Thankfully, despite her initial appearance, she's not a chaser type monster like Nemesis is. She only shows up at set locations similar to Mr. X from the original Resident Evil 2. But be careful anytime she shows up moving forward. Also, there's now a zombie here now. Thankfully, the trees are good for avoiding him. With that out of the way, we're now moving on to what's probably the first half of my favorite part of the game overall in retrospect. Because while I love the first trip through the mansion, it's really the follow-up section and then our return to the mansion that's ultimately my favorite chunk of the game on the whole, between either the remake or the original. There's just something about it that I think has the right amount of forward momentum while also having a good amount of its own puzzles going on. Albeit in one case, I'm not going to be actually seeing one of such puzzles, but, well, I'll talk more about that when we get to that, probably in a part or two at this rate. With that, let's get back into the room where we left the mansion, and then leave through the other door we saw earlier this very video. I know, actually, that was in the last part, wasn't it? Now, something to note, while I'm in this room again, I actually pick up the first aid spray. I don't use too many first aid sprays, if any, in this LP, because the herbs I find along the way are more than enough for what I need damage-wise, but the reason I don't is because other classic Resident Evils detract from your ranking the more first aid sprays you use. Feel free to use them as much as you want in this, as long as you have some, because they don't factor into your endgame ranking at all. In fact, there really isn't an endgame ranking here in Remake at all.
This is Brad. Come in, S.T.A.R.S Alpha Team. Come in. Does anybody hear me?
This is Chris.
This is Brad. S.T.A.R.S Alpha Team. Bravo Team. It doesn't matter. Respond. I repeat, this is
Brad, this is Chris. Brad? Damn. Thing's broken.
Oh, Brad, one day he'll get in contact with us. Of course, like with the scene with Wesker earlier, if you didn't get the radio from Richard because you didn't save him, that scene doesn't play at all. So welcome to the back courtyard of the mansion. We're going to have a lot of Cerberuses to deal with here. But we also just got our first blue herb. Blue herbs cure the poison status ailment, which is notably different than I think the poison that the yawn can inflict you with. There's just going to be some enemies that can inflict that on us, at least through the next middle third of the game or so. As long as you have one of those, you can combine it with a green and red herb to get a brown herb mixture, which is technically the best healing item in the game, that it heals you to max health as well as heals the poison status ailment, but that's not the biggest thing to worry about. There's a square-shaped hole here. This is why we needed the square-shaped crank from LT's house back there. You can hear the sound of a waterfall in the distance, and doing that has now opened up this lake for us to go along, allowing us to access further into the courtyard. Now, it's been a little bit since I last played the original Resident Evil. It's been since I believe I did a Halloween stream of it via the DS release in 2023 or 2022, I believe. And I believe around here in the original game is where you first see the first enemy that can poison you. We're going to see it a couple screens later here in Remake. The big thing is they're snakes. They'll jump out of the water or drop down from the trees above you, and their attacks can either damage you or damage you and poison you. And genuinely, I don't remember if the poison status ailment in these games can kill you or if it can just take you down to critical health. I want to say it's the latter, but future me will correct me on that, of course. The big thing is, of course, since this is Resident Evil Remake, another mechanic they added that I haven't covered yet is they actually brought in the limping from Resident Evil 2 Beyond, where if you're lower on health, you start slowing down your walking speed. So if you're really low, it's very easy for enemies to pick you off because you're just stumbling all over the place. It can be annoying to deal with, but I like the change because it actually makes healing more important than it was in the original Resident Evil 1. There's the snakes. Little baby yawns, I think. They might actually just be the same species of snake for all I remember. With that, welcome to our next major destination. This is the Guardhouse for the mansion. What I've always found interesting about this specific chunk of the game, and Remake especially highlights this, is that I think this is the most puzzle-centric area in the game. And to combat that, they actually also have the fewest enemies in the game here. There's still things that can very easily kill you, don't get me wrong, but what little action focus Resident Evil 1 has in the original or Remake goes to the sideline a little bit here. But our first destination is this room in specific, because this is our safe room for the area. Got a flash grenade and some ink ribbons. There's a kerosene tank here if you're burning more bodies than I am. The main thing I wanted to do is flush my inventory effectively shut, except for a healing item and my shotgun and the shells, for the few times I do actually come across an enemy. Now, for the most part, this place is played relatively straight, but the remixes they do are honestly pretty welcome as well. For instance, they actually give one room that we're headed to right now a lot more purpose than it had in the original game. Namely, if I was playing the original game, I'd actually go down that T intersection we just passed, but I now want to enter this area. This is effectively the lounge for the guardhouse. Also, arachnophobia warning. Moving forward, we're going to have a couple rooms where we have giant spiders as enemies, and not only can they damage you, they can also just outright poison you. Now, the important thing is here, we got a red oil lamp. It's not lit. If you have the lighter with Chris, you can light it, otherwise you need to go find the one again for Jill. A strange silhouette hovers in the reddish light. We got a round pupil with 3 lashes on top and 1 on the bottom. Let's keep that in mind. Oh, also, I should note, in that one diary note we got back in the bar on the first floor of the mansion, they mentioned that Trevor lost his lighter. That's actually the lighter you find as Jill. If you investigate it, it even has an engraving that effectively states that. In that regard, Jill gets that extra story note that Chris does not. Wrestling for an arm wrestling contest. Winner will be named Chief for a day of the Raccoon Police Department. That explains a little bit too much about the chiefs at the Raccoon Police Department. Over here we got another oil lamp. This one is green, so let's light it up. This time, the sigil below it is a round pupil with a snake-like pupil in the middle with 0 lashes except for the 2 off to the side. Seeing a theme with these oil lamps thus far. This first aid box contains a blue and green herb mixture, which if you get damaged in here and all, you might as well just use to cure whatever poison you get inflicted with by the spiders. The more important thing to grab in this room at the moment actually is also this red thing on here. This is a red book. We're going to need this in a later room. If you remember the layout of this area in the original game, you have a pretty good idea what that's for. Before we leave, we want to head all the way up the stairs here. As up at the top, there is not only a 3rd oil lamp, but a pool table and a butt poster. The orange oil lamp, if we light it up, showcases an eye with a round pupil and iris and 2 lashes disconnected from the eye. Now, if we investigate the pool table, we're going to see some billiards balls, 5 of which are actually seen on the screen. Blue 2, purple 4, orange 5, green 6, red 3. The important thing is remembering which numbers are tied to which color, as between the information on the billiard balls themselves and what the oil lamp showed us, we'll be able to open a lock later in this area. Not that I'm going to need to with how I've progressed in this LP, but if you've done something slightly differently, you're going to want to have that off the top of your head. So now that we have that information, I want to go down the T intersection we saw earlier. With that said, you may have noticed there's a box in this room. We actually want to place that over by that T intersection, as there's holes in the ground there, and if you get too close to them, a tentacle pops out and whaps you upside the head. So you need to push that box to a certain part there in order to have it cover it up and, make it able to be walked past. In the meanwhile, while I'm walking over to my next destination, I want to start briefly covering this game's development staff. I say briefly because, as I mentioned in Resident Evil 0, around this era for gaming is when mainstream games started having staffs in the 200 to 300 plus range, and I'd have no time to cover every single person, so I just like to cover the key staff in those cases. Starting off, let's talk about the planners. There's 3 credited on the game: Koji Kakai, Josuke Kaji, and Shigenori Nishikawa. Koji has been at Capcom effectively his entire career, as far as I can tell. They started on the planning department for Dino Crisis 2. They were then a planner on this and Clock Tower 3. They were designer for Resident Evil 4 and 5. They did some quest stuff for Dragon's Dogma, and then they came back to be a designer for Devil May Cry 5, Resident Evil 5 Gold, and Dragon's Dogma 2. They were also in the special thanks section. Josuke Kaji started their career in Ogre Battle 64 in the special thanks section, but they were a design assistant for Misadventures of Tronbon. They were a planner for this and Devil May Cry 1, as well as a game planner for Clock Tower 3. They were a planner for Okami. They were also on a planner for Mario Party Island Tour, Mario Party 10, did game design for Mario Party Star Russian Top 100. Also, I just got the map there. Do not investigate that area again after you get the map, because bees will come out of that hole like the one we fought back then when we got the Wind Crest, and, well, they're not super annoying. It's just safer to not have to deal with them whatsoever. Well, this room's definitely a little eerie. I see a file, though. Plant 42 report. 4 days have passed since the accident. The plant at Point 42 is growing at an amazing rate. Although there are many unknown aspects about this plant, we know that in comparison with the other group of plants, the T-virus has had a substantially stronger effect on this one. The T-virus has drastically morphed its host's anatomy as well as its size. Looking at its current state, it's difficult to imagine its original appearance. Nowhere on Earth will you find anything like it. We've also found that Plant 42 has 2 main sources of acquiring its necessary nutrients. One source is through its root. Somehow it's rooted itself down into the basement. Immediately after the accident, a scientist went mad and destroyed the aqua ring. Ever since, the basement's been like a pool. There's a high possibility that it's one of the chemicals in the water that's promoting the Plant 42's rapid growth. However, we've yet to determine this specific chemical. A bulb-like body of the Plant 42 has been sighted hanging from the ceiling of the first floor. We are sure that it used the air ducts to reach the first floor. Numerous long tentacle-like vines are protruding from the bulb. We believe the vines are the second means of acquiring its nutrients. When Plant 42 senses prey, it uses the tentacle-like vines to capture its prey. After doing so, suckers on the vine drain the prey of its blood. We've also noticed that it has some intelligence. When it captures its prey or when it's inactive, the vines twine around the door to stop possible intruders. Unfortunately, several of our scientists have already fallen victim to Plant 42. When we heard the stories from the survivors, they all observed one thing in common. When the uniform petal-like flaps open and reveal its vital internals, it has a tendency to become more aggressive. One witness reported that it was as if it was trying to protect itself. Why it behaves the way it does is still unknown. May 21st, 1998, Henry Sarton. Well, that's ominous. Notably, there was a bathroom behind me, by the way, and there's something we need to get in there, but because I'm going over here to push these bookcases first, a zombie that's in there has decided to make his appearance known. If we push these out of the way, there's a ladder over here, but I don't want to access that until I've done a little more in this area. Going back to the planners, the final one, as I mentioned, is Nishikawa. Their first project was Dino Crisis 2, and then they worked on this, then Dino Crisis 3 as a planner. They were a designer for Resident Evil 4. They were a director on Mad World. They just did game design for Vanquish. They were a lead designer for The Evil Within, and they were a leader on Evil Within 2, and they were still a project manager with Ghostwire Tokyo. So they were with Tango Gameworks prior to the things happening. So because that zombie followed me in, I can now grab the key over here with no issue. Now, there's a lot of keys that are one use in this area, and you can get a good idea of where to use them by examining the back and getting the room number. After a while, we can now use this to go access room 01, which was back near the entrance of the guardhouse. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 7, we're going to continue our process through the guardhouse, not quite finishing it off, but getting pretty close in the process. See you guys then.